Snap cratering after a brutal earnings report, missing on the top and bottom lines. The social media company posting its slowest ever rate of quarterly growth while also unveiling plans to slow hiring. Snap saying in its investor letter it is not satisfied with the results. They are delivering regardless of the current headwinds. And Brian, we saw this stock really just slide in a big way yesterday, continuing those declines down 37% right now.
One day.
It's an interesting storyline to me because in some ways the concerns about Apple's privacy settings there, that continuing to filter through into the quarter, but their daily active users actually grew. Like, it's not that they're not getting engagement. It's not that they're not getting users. It's the advertising side that is really creating a big headwind.
And they did beat, by the way, in the earnings. They had not much better, but I mean, they had a better loss than expected. The street had expected them to lose a little bit more money on the bottom line. But I think the big story for this company is, what does the future look like, right? That's been part of the seesaw that we've seen every earnings quarter for, let's say, the last year or so, where every time they drop earnings, people react to it very sharply. We've seen reactions to the stock after earnings that have seen the shares go up by 20 or 30%. So this is just kind of part of the story and the volatility for investors in Snap. But having no guidance was really, I think, the big takeaway from yesterday's earnings. It wasn't necessarily about the numbers they put on the tape. But as you mentioned, for Snap and maybe for the other social media companies as well, it's not just about the daily active users anymore. It's not just about the people that you have on the platform. What is it? How do you monetize those people that are on the platform?
No, that's a good point. It is, the focus for investors certainly has shifted from growth to really profitability. Where are you bringing in those profits there? And certainly the question I think this opens us up to is, well, we still have Meta on tap. We've got Alphabet, other earnings coming. Is this a sign of things to come, or is this a story that is Snap specific?
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to that overall picture, right, I think that there's so much interaction between Snap and, for example, Apple and Google, as we saw from just the iOS privacy changes leading to, not necessarily in this quarter, that was really more of a story in their last quarter, but that's not something that's agnostic to Snapchat, right? We've seen a number of other large publicly traded social media companies in the last few quarters mention that as a headwind as well. But look, at the end of the day, a lot of focus on why the stock is down 37% today is on the management side, right? You have MoffettNathanson out with a note this morning. They say they rarely ever decide to downgrade a stock right after a terrible earnings print, but they did exactly that because they feel like at one point Snap perhaps had a story for closing the monetization gap compared to its social media peers, but they said what they saw on the earnings call yesterday and the lack of guidance doesn't tell them that they can close that gap. So they say, look, at the end of the day, there is an overall story to your point about how a rising rate environment makes companies that don't have that cash flow in a robust manner not look as attractive. But I think that's an addendum to, not really the crux of the investment thesis for this stock.
Well, and to your point about no guidance, this coming from the investor letter, we are working to re-accelerate growth and take share, but we believe it will likely take some time before we see significant improvement. So that, to your point on the analyst note, it does raise questions for investors. Well, is this company simply not guiding because of the macro look, or is it because they don't have a grasp on how to turn things around?